Hello, and welcome to the Comedian's Paradise. This is a podcast where we speak to comedians, clowns, and mavericks from across the comedy and clown world. Now, today's guest is a friend of mine from the London circuit who now gigs in the Midlands and up in the Northwest. A real comedy de force of comedy and clown, Stephen Catling. He's a Malcolm Hardee Award nominee. He is a comedian and clown who, once you've seen, you've never forgotten. He always brings the unexpected. You're going to absolutely love this guy. Welcome, Stephen Catling.
Rapturous applause. S- yeah.
So,
Apologies, my dog is just no. Apologies because my dogs will come.
ah,
Because they'll be like, "Who? What are you doing? What are you talking?" Uh, don't worry, she's lovely. So
what's the dog's name?
the one that just came into the screen has just left. She's called Roxy. She's a spaniel.
Okay.
Um,
So Stephen, for anyone that's listening in right now as you're stroking your dog, tell
yeah.
us a bit about yourself. Like, how did you get into the world of stand-up, and what made you get into the world of clown?
So oh, those are several. That's a long story in question. So, I mean, what got me into comedy was so even at a very early age, my mother was introducing me to things like Billy Connolly and Lenny Henry on TV, and so they were some of my first comedians. But then in high school, I got introduced to like Monty Python by friends, which we sort of made our own parodies in RE of Noah's Ark, except we made it Noah's TARDIS. Um, and then that's sort of when I started. That's could be argued the genesis um, of comedy for me. But basically, first time I started performing solo and doing stand up would be when I started uni in my first degree at Lancaster. Um, and basically, long story short, I couldn't join the sketch show that year because I went into a silly amount of societies and missed the auditions. So I went, fine, I'll do something else. Let's give the stand up a shot. Uh, Wrote some stuff, um, did the work, went to the rehearsals, which we essentially were just workshopping before we did the shows in front of the university students that we would have our sort of bi-weekly show. Um, Basically, workshop went, no, don't do that. Oh, actually, you've got quite the knack for surrealism here. Let's try going that angle. And then over the years of being at Lancaster, it sort of became an arms race of how weird could I and how high energy could I make it. And then when I finally came to London, the South, and started performing in London, it was well, one, getting not massive knockback from reality, uh, of like, no, this is going to be much harder to make as a career as you think. Uh, and basically it sort of learned to get grounded into comedy, uh, or grounded in a way to make it more accessible. As for how I got to clowning, that one's a bit more difficult because it wasn't till maybe it was relatively earlier on in London, like maybe the first 1 or 2 years in London, that people said, "Oh, you might be interested in like you seem to be doing clowning or clowning." Like, um, and what I did and sort of had like an epiphany 2 years into London of how to really make my stuff more accessible, which was the use of music and soundtracks and effects for what I'm doing. Uh, that really it sort of defines the sort of atmospheric stuff of what I do. But I'm one of those clowns that didn't. trained to be a clown. I just evolved into it, if that makes sense.
Hmm.
And then I sort of identify and relate and have some camaraderie with uh, people who have been trained or were also self-taught or were just natural, or what you could consider natural clowns. Like think Frankie Thompson didn't is one of those that didn't study at Gaulier, but just came as they were. Um, but yeah, so that's my answer to that.
So, what a question I have on what you said there is,
Yeah.
what have you noticed with the difference with Gaulier trained clowns compared with self-taught clowns?
Um, hmm. I think I will notice something among Gaulier clowns. They tend to be more cliquey amongst Gaulier trained clowns, like uh within their year groups or within certain levels, they do tend to form more cliques around each other. Um, they also tend to go for, um, in contrast to say clowns who tend to do more stand-up stuff. Uh, I find Gaulier clowns tend to stick in sort of the clown nights or the cabaret or the alternative nights, but they don't necessarily venture out into more what would be considered mainstream stand-up clubs. Is something I've noticed.
And what are your, and you can answer it if you want, and you can say, you can tell me to sod off with this, but what are your thoughts on that as a whole? Do you feel that performers should be doing all sorts of nights, or what your thoughts are? Just like, nah, each their own. They do their own thing. I do mine.
Um, so that depends on the individual. Um, I personally, so I
Yeah.
remember talking with Mara. Mara and I were talking once, um, and she was sort of lamenting to me about how it's a shame that we don't get more alternative comedians on mainstream nights, or vice versa, in that it should all just be comedy. Like I've butted heads with people on alternative on alternative comedy on a few things, but like that. But uh some forms of clowning, or ways of doing clowning won't work at the club nights, because they are going sometimes very strong in what they're doing. And without that sort of established way of doing a certain way of approach to it, it wouldn't always work. So it depends on the individual clown. I think I would certainly encourage uh I would encourage everyone to try and always push their limits and their what they might be comfortable doing. Like uh I have no issue with necessarily encouraging said clowns to try and do more mainstream stuff or nights that wouldn't necessarily be considered alternative, but I would consider it more alternative friendly. And likewise, I would encourage more conventional stand-ups to also maybe try do more alternative. Like I was once talking with Mamoon at a Globe, uh,
Oh,
about, and he was sort of saying on stage, and personally, like sometimes he just wants to talk about crisps. And I was like, and that he's been sort of bottlenecked and pushed into a way of always having to talk about things like race, which he's very good at, and it's gotten very far. And he does. I think he does enjoy doing that. But there's a part of him that also, just wants to talk about crisps. And I say, then do
yeah.
like. Why is ev I don't if you want to do it.
Yeah.
Or at least try. Or as my favorite DM and probably voice actor and celebrity is Matt Mercer says to many of his cast members when they ever ask if their character can do something in his D&D campaigns, yeah, you can certainly try. Uh, so you can certainly try.
Hmm. Yeah. No, it's yeah. I would love to see Mamoon talk about crisps and see how it turns out.
I mean, there's a guy, Adam Evans, who has done a few years of it. I don't know if he's still going to keep doing it or for how long, but he had literally the quick crisp review show, and it's the entire show is involved of him basically eating crisps and reviewing them, and like, yeah, I think he got sponsored by a particular company as well, and the ones where the crisps are just plain, but they have you can customize the flavorings on and put them on. They're fucking great crisps. Uh, can't say I've seen the show myself, but it sounds like it's very good.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah,
No, no.
like if I mean, admittedly, that is a solo show, and that has the luxury of probably being able to do that. I'm not sure how it would work in a more club kind of setting, and that's fair. Not everything that works in a fringe show can be done in a club. Um, I would say vice versa, but stand-up tends can work at fringe. It's just uh possibly harder to stand out,
Yeah.
uh is the difference. So yeah, you go do your thing. You
One of the things you said that was very interesting in terms of like girly clowns being cliquey. I mean, that's the same sort of thing I've noticed in some of the stand-up circuit as well. Like, and I'm not going to say the
oh
wrong
yeah,
names.
they're
Like, they have a big disdain towards alternative comic, and I hear a lot on that side of things. They say that if it's not how they view comedy being word jokes or like stories or that, they don't see it as comedy. And yeah, big clubs as well, like Top Secret. This is what I hear from comedians that do them. He doesn't like character acts. He only likes sort of set stand up. And the promoter from New York, she told me a big one, Candy Claire, says she doesn't mind like stupid comedy, but she just wants to see sort of set up punchlines and storytellers.
I mean, to be fair, a lot of clowns are very don't necessarily focus on setup punchline or quantity or consistency of jokes. I definitely do try and do that, and that's probably sometimes why I'm able to do some of these nights more. Um, and but at the same time, I will point out Top Secret, at least the publicity stunt that they've pulled off
Oh,
is um so I don't which I'm not going to take seriously. Um, where they're saying they're banning people who've had Botox injections into their shows because it's unnerving uh the acts because their rooms are the people aren't reacting with facial expressions or laughter apparently, which makes me think maybe we should get better comedians. But because I definitely have seen know some people who've been on those lineups, and they do get great people on, but um, uh, they also if maybe well, my feeling on this, if they're really genuinely believing, and this is if they sincerely believe that they're comedians, whatever level of establishment that they're booking, are uncomfortable because the audience isn't laughing, then I'll say, if you can't stand at the heat, get out of the kitchen.
Yeah, I don't know. It's not really something that's in my control. That sort of thing. It is a yeah, it is a publicity stunt. Um, yeah, very obviously.
But equally, like not all people who have Botox are not going to be able to respond. It depends on the level and amount of Botox they've got, but also just fuck them. Uh,
It
like
yeah.
if they genuinely believe what they're saying, fuck them.
W- Well, on top of that, would that put some people off from going to that club? I know it's a publicity stunt to get more people in. I'm not too sure that club needs more publicity considering how big it is already.
No,
But
no, it's still a secret. Um, I don't think there's necessarily. Maybe they want to get a bigger venue, and they want to.
ah,
Maybe they need to get more numbers for that, like which is would be strange since I've definitely been there myself, and they consistently seem to fill both rooms at the same time. Because it's weird that they have two gigs happening above each other.
yeah.
That's at the same time, and like, well, we're going to rotate the acts from one room and then put them downstairs and the upstairs, vice versa, basically. But yeah, um, but you were saying, wait, oh right, yeah, no, there's definitely, but yeah, there are definitely stand-ups that and clubs that can be cliquey as well. Like they're not innocent of that either. Um, and both sides have their snobs.
One thing that would be very interesting, I know like Stamp Town are like a fantastic like what they do
Mm,
for the clown world, but I would like to see altern. And Dan Lee said it on the podcast when I interviewed him. He
yeah.
would like to see a venue dedicated to alternative comedy, and it would be good to see. Well, not just
Um,
yeah, or all forms. Yeah, most I would like to see that. I mean, Soho Theatre puts on a lot of alternative shows, and Angel Comedy does, but yeah,
I wouldn't say I've gone for Angel Comedy on that one. I would say Monkey Barrel has definitely tried to do that with the other show, as they've called, uh, which is meant to be an alternative acts, and they certainly do book alternative acts. Um, Equally, ACMS is an established brand that is booking consistently books many alternative acts. Otherwise, it couldn't be called ACMS because it's the Alternative Comedy and Moral Society. Likewise, Troy Club. There isn't necessarily an established club. There are certainly established promoters
yeah.
and who have their established clubs. Even if those clubs aren't necessarily something as grand as say Glee or the Comedy Store, uh, or the Stand. Um, but yeah, maybe I certainly would be nice to, as Dan was putting, see more dedicated clubs for that.
It would.
Um,
I would love to see it.
mm, um, yeah.
Now, what would you say, following on from like your journey in clown and journey in stand up, who are your comic inspirations and why?
Uh, I think Python is definitely always going to be the keystone cornerstone of my influence and inspiration because they were a surrealist sketch group, uh, and that Pythonist humor runs quite deep on me, and it's simply just because that daftness is sort of ingrained in me. Sort of, I feel that the best form of comedy tend to be have an element of unpredictableness. Like you can see there is an internal logic to it, but it's sort of like in a magician's trick that you're not necessarily meant to see it, or it appeals to something just primal and is incredibly stupid and daft and silly. Um, but then I'm also influenced a lot by, say, Rod Gilbert, it's definitely his more angry bits um, as well, and commitment. Uh, or I think again, Billy Connolly's certainly been an influence. Owen J. Lilly, Maria Bamford. Um, but then obviously I see new things and that gets more taken into. So can't say I've not had some influence from Delightful Sausage and Beck Hill or Elf Lines. Uh, but yeah, so yeah, I do have a lot of different people, but it's really difficult to place who are specific influences of like, yeah, that's because I feel like I've you consume so much at a certain point, things start just churning up. Like recently, I've been making a bit that's sort of been inspired of Doctor Strangelove. Um, and so like even old, various old or film comedy like Mel Brooks has certainly also been an influence as well for sort of that sort of imaginative creativeness.
So what I've done there with that question there, um,
Mm.
I'm doing a course called well on sitcom writing, and it was very interesting. I watched a little thing where the guy who was teaching the course did the thing called hot seating. Do you know what that is?
Uh, Explain it to me, and I might pick up the idea.
It's very simple, and so he's telling us to do a character, but he forced us into situation. He asked us, so he'd ask us sometimes uncomfortable questions like, "What was the worst thing that's happened to you?" And then, "What was the weirdest thing that happened to you?" But
But in character,
no, not in character, but as the person. But they came up with some funny things to it, and he
right?
said that was a very interesting thing. Like the first thing you come up with is often the more interesting idea. And I
Yeah,
don't know necessarily that's true, but what you said there, when I asked you that question about who your inspirations are, the names you came up with just
yeah.
on the fly, give me an. I I would like to learn about what your thoughts are like Beck Hill, Elf
Mm.
Lions, and you've mentioned about Rod Gilbert with his angry comedy, but what is it about Beck Hill and Elf Lions that you like? What's the quality that they have that you admire?
Ingenuity.
And how do
Um,
they illustrate it? What have they done that shows that?
right. So, for example, we take Beck Hill is probably going to be the easier example on this one. Her incorporation of the paper puppetry that she does, like it is a very rare, if skill, definitely amongst comedians, practically non-existent. Uh, Maybe barring herself, like I think I know more ventriloquists than I know more paper. I can think of a few ventriloquists. I know only one person who's done paper puppetry. Uh, and so her commitment to like her ideas as well as her approach to it is actually quite admirable. While I'll say Elf Lions, it is her ability to it's not just the volume of show, it's also the vastness and interesting show. Like it's fascinating to see her how a show horses developed, uh, just because it was basically just her desire to sort of want to prance on stage and pretend to be a horse. Uh, 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 but also just the fact that the line that sticks out with me is when she asks an audience member, what, in a silly horse voice, what is your name? And they obviously give their name and says, that's a stupid name. I'm going to call you Biscuit. uh, uh, but in Elf's cases, I think a thing definitely enjoy watching is her physicality. Like she's a very tall woman, and but it's, and there's a sort of very comedic physicality to what she does that is very expressive. Um, and it's her ability to sort of at one point do sort of more stand-up-y esque stuff. Like Elf, I think is some. someone I admire because they seem to have an excellent fusion of clown and more traditional aspects of stand-up that's created this beautiful fusion. Um,
Yeah.
um, uh, mm,
Yeah. She's one that does both worlds. And she can do
mm.
both.
I mean, I think she prefers to do one more than the other, as she was definitely
Yes.
saying, like her agent was frustrating, like, we're trying to have you audition for the live Apollo. Please stop doing the horse. Uh,
Ha ha ha
uh,
ha.
uh, which again, whether that is a genuine conversation she's had with her agent or not, because obviously comedians do not always tell the truth. I don't know, but it's definitely possibly very believable. Uh, uh, um, but yeah, I think Elf will do what Elf finds interesting and fascinating. And again, I think that's always what the community should be doing, do what's interesting.
Yeah, thing
Uh,
is, yeah, she's great. She's a nice. I've only spoken to her twice, and that was during
mm,
lockdown, doing some courses. But um, she, what did she say that was interesting? What do I remember about her? I've forgotten now. Sorry. Oh yeah. Um, she, a lot of people, yeah, she only did like a month of Goliath, but
mm,
she learned how to climb through Spy Monkey. So that was an interesting thing with her. But she's
mm.
gone on to do lots of great things with herself. And
I
she's
didn't know
probably
that she was.
arguably much more successful than people who've done the year program or 2 year program, which I find
I
interesting.
did not know her time with Golly was so brief.
Yeah, that's what I had a chat with her and she told me. But
Mm,
I also heard another podcast, Etomps, the village where a lot of Goli is. She, I listened to a podcast with Stuart Goldsmith as well, and she said, well, she said never mind. She said some funny thing happened with her. Someone tried to get in a car, but I don't know.
yeah, I feel like this that needs to be said by Elf. So everyone go check Stuart Goldsmith's podcast for that story. Uh, um, I suppose. But yeah, no. Also, like, mm, yeah, no, it can be interesting. Golly is certainly something that does interest me. Um, Fascinating man, but it's never something I've felt the desire to want to do because I would have to put so much time aside and money
Yeah.
to go do it. It's a very privileged thing to do. Um, and also equally harder and harder probably because he's teaching less and less, and obviously he does have his successors and
Yeah.
so that are carrying his vision. But you probably want to be if you're going for goal, you want to be taught by the man.
Which is not possible now because he stopped teaching.
Oh, has he stopped teaching now?
Yeah, I think last year or so he
No.
stopped teaching. I mean, yeah. I did enjoy the course and it was good.
Mm,
I probably should have just focused on select modules, but
mm,
um, I know that you and Josh and Vane spoke about how a comic there's a French character and he got tutoring off Julia Masley and Vigo
mm,
Venn. And that
mm,
was interesting to hear because I think that in some respects you would learn a lot more from these great teachers if you just did a show with them and got one-on-one time with them. When in the courses themselves, you do learn a bit, but there's like 20 or 30 people there. How much time
mm,
can they devote to you to help you get better? Whereas if you do a
mm.
show with them, you can spend hours and hours with them.
I mean, I do love both Julia and Vigo. They're good people and good friends. Uh,
Good guys, I
uh,
like them both. Well, I don't,
yeah.
I have not really spoken to Vigo, but from what I've seen of him, he seems all right. Julia,
No,
absolutely lovely woman.
they're both very lovely. No, definitely have interacted more with Vigo in recent years, but that's because Julia had a skyrocket of fame with her Malcolm Hardee winning, and then her massive success with Choosh, followed by
Legs.
the
No,
well
not legs.
legs.
Bloody ha ha ha.
Ha 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 ha. I don't ha 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 ha. The very serious show that is very serious as she insists.
It was quite an interesting from my side when I experienced it because I went to Edinburgh 2023 by myself to go and watch her show. And if you're just on your own, you sometimes feel a bit uncomfortable, right? So if
Mm.
I'm alone and we're going to watch a show, sometimes I'll talk to the people there. So I chatted to this lesbian lady, and what happened? I had a good chat with her. The thing that was quite funny was Julia got up on stage, and she asked her, "What's your problem, or whatever?" And she says, "I've never told my friend that I'm into women." And then right on stage, I remember her getting her on stage to call her friend and say, "That's what I'm into."
Right, that's very good. See, I don't actually feel uncomfortable going shows on my own. Um, I mean, it's often at Edinburgh, it's great because they're usually someone I know uh, from, and because I've lived across the country and gigged across the country, there's usually nearly always someone else that's going to know me. So I think one friend was saying it's strange because it's annoying walking with you because every 5 minutes you're going off to talk to someone else that you've just seen that you know. And you're like, hey, you live in Scotland. How's the Glasgow scene? Because of the time I've lived in Glasgow, or because I was gigging in the north, uh, and basically in the northwestern Yorkshire or the Midlands before I even moved up there. Before I even went and moved down to London, originally.
Well, with that, yeah, that's what when I watch a show and I'm on my own, especially a comedy
Mm.
show, I often chat to someone because I feel uncomfortable going on my own. But
Mm.
what you said there was interesting because I know a lot of people in comedy too, but there's also definitely people that I don't like in comedy, and some we probably ignore each other. So with you knowing a lot of people, what's it like when you go to the fringe? Other things when you see people you don't know, but they're friends with people that you know.
If I don't know them, then I'll say hello.
No, but if you're not cool with them,
Oh, if I'm not cool with them.
if you know a lot of people in comedy, there's gonna, I think, no matter who you are,
So
someone's
if
not gonna
they're
like you for one reason or another.
barring maybe some pleasantries, you don't have to talk to them. Like I'm not obligated to say any more than being polite. Uh, so yeah, like I'm not gonna go out of my way to bitch and argue with them and say, "Ah, fuck you for existing." Um, fuck you and everything you've ever achieved or trying to achieve. Um, equally, sometimes it's an opportunity. If you give people a chance, yeah, or you might have got off on them on the bad foot, and you can and meeting them in a different circumstance and time might have maybe after some time depends might change those feelings. Like I definitely know comics that on the initial meeting I met them, I wasn't hot on them for various reasons. But then some gradual time with them at different places, or even because they shared advice or thoughts, my opinion changes. And likewise, people that you might necessarily have initially liked as when you first met them, they can also turn out to be assholes later down the line. Like that's just the way it is. Marvin.
No, okay. No, I was just seeing your thoughts. That's all. Because I've
Yeah.
yeah, it's that's the flip side of what you've said. When you know a lot
Mm,
of people, there's gonna be, even though you like a lot of people, and honestly, I do love the comedy world. There's a lot of great
mm.
people in it, and it's fun, and it's never boring. But there's always gonna be a few. There are a few people that you don't get on with.
Oh
That's
yeah, there's plenty of cunts. Don't get me wrong. But I'm not going to fire off their names.
don't.
Uh,
This is not what the podcast is about.
um, no, exactly. So I'm going to just keep some more on that. And like, there should always be a chance to let people redeem themselves, because you would hope that if it was the shoe was on their foot, they would do the same as well.
That's a difficult one. I don't know. I believe in one thing. In I think you're right in terms of being
Oh,
polite.
I'm talking like people being ass who you might have been met and they've been assholes, not necessarily. Um, there are certain characters that definitely become very sort of, I will probably not want anything to do with you. But that's because they are a particular kind of asshole. Uh,
Yeah, I think there's always got to be limits. But I think anyway, let's move on to another topic,
yeah.
a more interesting topic, and it's something I'm going to ask a lot more of. Um,
Mm.
what's a quote that inspires you, and what is a movie scene or TV scene that inspires you?
Uh, okay. Um, so a quote that's been getting in my head recently is thanks to my delightful partner getting me to watch Ted Lasso.
Uh,
Um, is the it's not the hope that kills you, it's the lack of hope that kills you. Um, so I think it's the importance of belief is sort of, or at least believing or trying to put faith in what you're doing. You need to have that because when you don't, that's what's going to destroy you. Uh, have you ever watched Ted Lasso?
don't be offended, Stephen, but I haven't.
It's fine. I only started watching it about a few months ago. So, and I hadn't watched it for years. So I have no right to be offended if you haven't watched it as anything. But basically, do you want me to give you a quick premise of the show?
Yeah, sure.
Right. So Ted is an American football coach that gets transferred to a sort of underdog uh, Premier League team in that's basically made up. Basically, it's Richmond Greyhounds is meant to be the team, so it's made up. But he was hired by the now owner of the club to get back at her ex-husband because her hope was to have him destroy the team. But his counter it, his actual enthusiastic positivity and uh, can-do attitude basically actually has a positive effect on the entire team and herself. So basically, it's a show of
So let me run.
optimism is good.
So he runs a team, and this girl comes in. He originally didn't want her to be in the team, but she
No, no, no,
wanted.
no, 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 no. He is an American football coach. The manager, the owner of the fictional football team, hired him as a way to actually destroy the club
Ah, okay.
because he doesn't know anything about football, but because of his sort of positive at way of doing things, um, and basically that sort of happy-go-lucky approach he has actually has a benefit to herself and the team.
Ah, okay, yes, yes, yes.
Yeah. But that quote I felt was quite powerful. Um, Film scenes or a scene that sticks in my head that inspires me is probably the I'm going to sound like such a fucking nerd. Um, Lord of the Rings, specifically the two towers as they basically charge through uh the Uruk-hai. So when Theoden has gone into such despair, it's like, what can we do against such like reckless hate? And Aragorn's like, ride out with me, ride out with me and meet them. And Theoden's like, for death and glory. And Aragorn's like, no, for Rohan, for your people. And it's sort of that, basically that defiance seen against sort of unwavering darkness and evil
Hmm.
that sticks with me. Because yeah, about that point it's like what, probably 20 men left in the keep, still fighting thousands of Uruk-hai, and then obviously Gandalf arrives with Éomer and 2,000 riders, uh, who stupidly charge straight into a pike formation. But it's a fantasy and magic happens, so we have to just ignore
Yes.
the I have to suppress the medieval realism, because at least they actually made it look good. Uh, is probably an inspiring one.
What's it called?
Also, the arrogance of Game of Thrones to say we'll make the Siege of Winterfell look better than Helm's Deep, and then they did that.
Oh God, yes. But
You
I'll
don't
make it.
why? I won't go on that because that would be a rant and a half of two people who definitely should have were right to be hired initially, but at a certain point should have raised their hand and say, "This is beyond us. Let's pass the mantle to someone more capable of enacting this." So, for the benefit of the show and especially fucking two idiots, uh, like excellent adapting, excellent adapting things from book to screen, but let them have to think for themselves. Uh,
It's
Disaster.
it's what it is. It was. Look, I remember Game of Thrones fondly. I've not watched House of the Dragon. I heard the first season is good, but I heard the season two is a bit of a letdown. But it was a good series.
I like House of the Dragon. Uh, I definitely remember most of Game of Thrones fondly if we ignore seasons
Yeah,
five,
no,
six, seven, eight.
it was good. I like the Battle of the Bastards. That was a good battle.
Oh yeah, that was fucking excellent. Like I've that's another bit I will keep watching. That's another scene I like to keep watching with Jon Snow basically charging to go and save Rickon. And then obviously getting dismounted because the horse gets shot with full of arrows, and basically him basically pulling out his sword as the Bolton's army's cavalry is charging upon him, and then that massive clash. Like it's an epic.
It's great.
I I will enthusiastically love that bit, and that's probably another bit I'll keep watching it again.
It's
But
funny
what
how
they
we've got
did,
here.
but what they did to the Dornish plot, I can't forgive. What they did to the Martells and Dawn, I can't forgive because it's so far from the books
Hmm.
that it makes me angry.
Oh, it's all right, Stephen. It's
No,
all right.
no, it's not all right.
Sorry. Now, it is a funny how we've got into this. This is brilliant. Now, one thing I want to ask.
Those seasons are like the prequel trilogy to the fans of the original trilogy, and what the sequel trilogy is to the original and prequel trilogy.
Of Star Wars.
I will always hate them. As in the Star Wars fans will always hate the
It
sequel.
was what hasn't isn't Kathleen Kennedy leaving? That's what I heard.
I don't know.
Yeah, she's leaving, but she has ruined. The Rogue One was an amazing film, but
Rogue
the
One was
thing,
great. Rogue One was great, and also so is the Mandalorian and the Obi-Wan series. Probably a few others I've not watched myself yet. But they also do, unfortunately, it's sort of if it anything Star Wars that is a film or TV is a potential toss of the coin of whether it's going to be amazing television or film
yeah,
or complete and utter dog shit.
there's too much going on. But I mean, what what I do? Have you heard seen it? I'll say one thing in this. Look up the Critical Drinker, and I would love to hear what your thoughts are on him because he mentions a
Mm,
lot of what you said, and he reviews a lot of things that go online, like very brutally honest. So yeah,
mm.
just look him up. He's great. But one thing I want to say, and this is a question that a lot of people ask, and it's how you
Yeah,
like to
we
be
need to get.
remembered,
How do I like to be remembered?
but as a comedian.
I gathered that was as a comedian, not as a general, though it is kind of tied. Um, I would like to be remembered in saying that in such a way that if I die, they have to make a new version of the Malcolm Hardee Awards, but it's my name. Um, but hopefully, I don't die tragically like Mal in the way that Malcolm Hardee did. Hopefully, I just live a very long life and die peacefully in my sleep. Um, but I want to be remembered as the level of and obviously performing at sort of Edinburgh award-winning level and sell out like consistently sell out shows sort of level. But I want to be mostly remembered. Obviously, that's what I want. But if in terms of specifically the memory, I want to be remembered as one of a kind, original genius. Um, um, Maverick. My partner just laughed at me for that.
Oh,
Thank you, Laura.
sorry.
Uh, but I want it sort of like as the intro, basically, you could go to one of Stephen's shows and anything could have happened, and whatever would have been happened, it would have been brilliant. It would be brilliant. Um, and that's why he's one of the best. And equally, it's not enough, it wouldn't be enough to be considered just one of the best alternative comedians. I think it's sort of the desire to be acknowledged as one of the best comedians.
Hmm.
Like yeah, great if I'm in the top 100 alternative comedians, but I will be in the top 100 just comedians.
That, well, guys, you've heard it here first. I hope you've enjoyed, Stephen. You want to be like the Channel 4 thing that they had a while ago.
Which one, channel? Do you mean the Harry Hill show?
No, they did
One
the
that,
thing called the 100 best comedians of all time. And
oh,
Don
that
Ward was
one.
on there. Don Ward was on there as well.
Was he?
Yeah.
Don Ward. I think wasn't Stuart Lee like 49th or 47th
I can't
on
remember
that?
fully, but it was, yeah, Don Ward, him. You had Jerry Sadowitz on there quite high up. But yeah, no, okay.
I'm not going to comment on Jerry Sadowitz.
Okay.
Um, the man definitely has a niche and a market for what he has created, and all respect to him. But it's probably not for me. And to be honest, he wouldn't give a shit anyway. But what I will say, I admire Sadowitz for his being an equal opportunities offensive person, in that he just um in that his goal is to just be offensive to everyone and everything under the sun. And that is his purpose. So I certainly tip off my hat to that man in that regard.
He is, yeah. He may come across as an arrogant racist on stage, but when you talk to him off stage, he actually seems pretty cool. Like when I met him in a magic shop, he was actually quite meager and polite and friendly.
I mean, Frankie Boyle, when I remembered him as Charles Mock the Week, always seemed to come off as a bit of an asshole, but he's apparently one of the sweetest men in comedy. Like he's paid like I won't name the comedian in question, but she writes definitely has written for a show, and when she's had issues like dental issues, he's gone and paid for it so that she can work. Like he's one of the nicest men who's could definitely say pretty shocking stuff. But um, there's a difference between well, not always the case, but you see on stage of a performer is a reflection or a mask of that person presented in a certain way. Doesn't mean it's necessarily entirely the entire pic. Like it is one. Suppose the way to look at it's a one dimension look at of a cube. All you're seeing is a square on stage.
Hmm.
There's there's more to that person. So it would make sense that Sadowitz is probably I wouldn't be surprised if he's not just a semi decent person off stage. Um, uh, because again, what he's doing on stage is an act, it's a performance.
Yeah.
Um, and not all. I mean, that being said, I don't think you can hide behind that. Like Dapper Laughs tried to do on a BBC News interview, saying like, "Oh, it's a satire, it's a character." Well, that's the thing. It doesn't seem like you're doing that thing very well because people are thinking you're legit, and it sounds pretty legit. Um, so dangerous territory that one. But anyway,
So, for anyone that's listening in now, now let's and what is a bit of advice that you give to any comic out there?
um, um, making me think of a famous, a very good joke, which is, I asked my Zen master, um, what should I do in life? And he says, don't do what I tell you to do. So I didn't. Uh, um, so again, go by the beat of your own drum is what I say. Um, don't do something because don't do material just because that's what conventional wisdom and idea would suggest all the time. If you instinctually feel like something's going to work, go at it, keep working, keep refining it. Eventually, hopefully, you create something that's you, authentic you. So, and interesting. Because if the work that you create is interesting, then you don't necessarily need to work, and as well as funny, then you don't need to worry about um, the rest because eventually it'll follow in time.
Okay. And
And then, as long as you don't follow also this principle of Steve Martin, which is, get so good at it, they can't ignore you.
hmm, now it's good and social media follows.
Um, I mean, yes and no, but because there's many that are fine without the social media followers. But it certainly does make it easier if you do have a massive following on TikTok these days.
Definitely. There's a lot of clubs in America, they want you to have a certain amount of followers.
Well, like, maybe measuring things on an arbitrary sense because just because you have, and also America, the country that has voted now an actual illegal felon, not once, but twice into office.
I I thought both were absolutely horrendous. I thought she was also horrendous as well. And
I'm not saying that she was good. I'm just saying he is worse. And
I
he's cartoonishly worse.
I think that they can't. If you put the people up they had against him, you can't expect to not have that happen. They were absolutely dreadful, both of them. If they put someone who was half decent, maybe Bernie Saunders, they would have.
They wouldn't go, Americans don't like socialists. They wouldn't have gone with Bernie. Um,
But if they put someone who was half decent, they would have had him.
I mean, here's something I've been thinking recently, because Trump, in my opinion, is basically a puppet uh, for Musk and Putin uh, in the way that he acts sometimes. Why don't the Democrats, uh, I don't know, get Elmo to run, um, or Big Bird or Kermit the Frog? Because everyone likes the Muppets. And if they want a puppet for a president, give them a decent puppet. Oh, geez. I want to talk about. It's going to be really difficult to talk about the Roe v. Wade, but women's right to choose.
Now, for anyone that's
Caught the tail end of
I
that.
don't know how to end the segue through there. What? No, we'll two more questions. What is it
Sure.
that you love about about comedy, and how do they find out about you?
Okay, so what I love about comedy is the ability that it can do to make people connect in a room, and basically laugh and enjoy at some of the most daft uh, stuff in the world. Um, but also just because it makes life better. Uh, and where they can find me, best place to probably follow me is on Instagram. Uh, Look usually for a picture of a man dressed as a slug or a bumblebee. Uh, uh, so it'll be Catling Stephen on Instagram, something comedian Catling on Facebook, or uh, Mooseface42 on X. At some point, I'll get Blue Sky. Um, that's the best way you can find me.
Okay, guys, you've heard Stephen Catling. Hope you've loved him. We've got some great guests coming up. We've got a gay, blind Singaporean comedian that I'm chatting to tomorrow.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, he had a mad story where someone, yeah, he's had a very interesting story. Jeffrey So, great guy. Who else have I got coming up? You're gonna hate me for this, Stephen, but I've got Frank Sinatra coming up in April.
Why would I hate him? I haven't seen his act. I'm only
What
familiar.
he dresses up as
It's
Adolf
Frank
Hitler.
Sinatra doing Frank Sinatra. Um, I mean, Sinatra was a Nazi sympathizer, so fuck him. Uh, I again, I need. Honestly, I've heard this act for a few years now. I need to see it at some point. Um, it
It's
sounds brilliant.
it
It,
works. It does quite well for it, so I can't say, but I know that there's people that, yeah, he pushes the envelope. Well, I don't know if he pushes the envelope, but there are obviously people that aren't gonna have a bit of an attitude towards it.
is he is he a sort of more GB News kind of candidate person, or is he just pushing an envelope?
Not a GB News kind of person. So I tell you a bit about his act. He comes up on stage, and I watched a bit of it on Comedy Unleashed, and he plays the song. You know, that's right. But he
Yeah,
does all these like Hitler puns, and you know when they go, "That's right," he goes, "That's right." That's but he does it in spoof with a Frank Sinatra song, and it's the
that sounds like it's worth a whirl.
but yeah, he's. I'm interested to hear his thoughts. He's going to be interesting, and that's why I do the podcast in a way. I like to have a different point of view on things. I like
Mm,
to see a different angle because I think it's
mm.
more interesting than just hearing the same angle all the time.
Again and again and again and again. Yeah. No, but it has been a delight to have you, to be on here, Marvin.
Yeah, thanks for coming on.
Yeah, to be having this discussion, and Marvin, the autism's kicking in, Marvin.
I've got something wrong with me as well, Steve. I think I've got ADHD, so that's what it is.
That would explain.
No worries. Right. Um, thanks for listening, guys, and I'll see you guys soon.
Mm.